So absolutely remarkable scenes in the Rugby Championship. Argentina beat the All Blacks and Australia beat South Africa. Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are you?
Topsy-turvy world of rugby at the moment. I don't think anybody had Argentina going to New Zealand and winning. After New Zealand getting their win and the monkey off the back, and they managed to beat South Africa, and okay, everything's grand, Joe Schmidt is in, let's go. And then Michael Cheika arrives and just pokes them in the eye and says, you forgot about us, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising for everybody, but I think given what Argentina did the last time out at home to Australia, beating them 48-17, I think that was probably would have raised a few eyebrows, that performance as well. Scotland they won one test in Argentina, probably should have won the last test. They lost the series, so you're kind of trying to figure out over the summer where were Argentina. Under Michael Cheika, Contepomi's back in there. Does it kind of dilute Ireland's performances a little bit over the summer? I'm not sure, but certainly there's issues with New Zealand rugby and that team, and it was a great match. There was great bite, great intensity to it, and they struggled big time, New Zealand, with the breakdown and their discipline. Again, they seem to give away a lot of penalties. So no love lost afterwards either. Michael Cheika was asked about, Ian Foster was talking about the referee, and he kind of fired back at Ian Foster, and particularly talking about the breakdown. Foster said that he was disappointed with Argentinian players not rolling away, slowing the ball down, and Cheika then says, well, he'd know all about it because they're experts at that. So it was interesting looking at, to see Joe Schmidt in the coaching box for the first time as well, fully involved. But Argentina certainly kind of, that's the first time in their history that they've won in New Zealand, like Ireland in July. So, it was a fantastic win for them, but lots of issues and problems kind of arose again for New Zealand.
What does it say about our wins there? Does it say that maybe we should rein ourselves in here? There's a very, very even rugby world at the moment, more even than it seems like it's ever been. And so whoever is in form next year in September, October is going to be the ones who win the World Cup, as opposed to, be the best team in the world now for the next year and a half. It kind of is irrelevant who's the best now.
Yeah, it is. And it would, like 2018, I think, regarding reeling ourselves in, I think we've learned from that probably a few years ago when, not publicly everyone wasn't jumping, and certainly the team themselves weren't saying we're going to go and win a World Cup in 2019. But, the hype and the excitement is there, and it was a brilliant year for Ireland. We've gone over that so many times, winning in Australia, beating New Zealand in Dublin, England for a Grand Slam in Twickenham. You have to celebrate that. 19 then started with that loss to England in Dublin, and they kind of bruised and battered Ireland, and it ended up being a very, very disappointing year. Lots of kind of negativity around the team after that, and I think you talk about the international teams kind of evening themselves out, and they've been really competitive. It's crazy when you look at Australia. They were hammered in Argentina and they were woeful. And you look at them at the weekend beating South Africa. They were 25-3 up with 6 minutes to go against the Springboks, and looked brilliant. Their attack was superb. So there's no consistency there at the moment from any teams. New Zealand in South Africa, that game in Nelspruit, they were hammered. The week after in Johannesburg, they beat South Africa. So a lot of kind of unpredictable results at the moment. But there's one thing you'll always get against Argentina is competitiveness, desire, passion. They're going to be in your face all day, and that's just the nature of the character, the type of players. I think obviously they're very well coached as well. Buffelli kicked all his penalties and the conversion as well, and punished New Zealand for their lack of discipline and probably frustration. So New Zealand are in a place that particularly with Ireland at home, and this loss at home, that that aura that we speak about is being chiseled away a little bit, and they're usually the dominant side who are kind of playing with pace, tempo, bullying the opposition, being really physical. And we've always kind of, if you're a rugby fan, you'd have to admire what the All Blacks, the standard that they set in their history and the dominance they've always had and the way they've played. But it's probably good for the game, but it's certainly not good if you're a New Zealand rugby fan at the moment, because another loss at home like this, it's 3 consecutive losses for the first time in their history. So they're kind of breaking all kinds of records. They've lost 6 of their last 8 test matches, which is, again, you have to kind of check yourself. And I had to go back and look at these results. There was, France-Ireland in November, 2 against Ireland in July. The loss in South Africa, and now the loss to Argentina. So 6 losses in 8 tests is something you don't kind of associate with them. I still think they have a lot of good players, and I still think they'll probably turn this around with better coaching and the changes that they've made. But they're not as formidable as we've seen New Zealand teams in previous years.
Do you expect there to be more significant changes to the coaching ticket, at least? Because it does feel that they've somewhat backed themselves into a corner by backing Ian Foster last week, and Schmidt was almost the change that they've made, and I guess they were hoping that would be enough change.
Yeah, well, they brought in a new forwards coach and defence coach as well, and Joe Schmidt coming in. So I don't think they're going to change anything at this to make any drastic sort of change, because they backed him to take him through to the end of the World Cup. So if you break it up again, it's more uncertainty. So I think they're going to have to try and stick together and probably learn that, they're not this dominant force as they were. And that's just the way the rugby world is kind of evening itself out a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what happens then in November when they play Scotland, Wales and England. How they fare in those games. I think that'll be probably a really good measure at the end of their season of where they're at. If they get 3 positive results there, then maybe they'll learn a lot from this and probably transition a few more players through. But you've got to give massive credit to Argentina and Michael Cheika and Felipe Contepomi and what they're doing. Interestingly, I was looking at the teams who played, who started on Saturday for Argentina, and 10 of those players started against Ireland in November. Well, 9. There was a couple on the bench. So there's about 15 or 16 of that 23 played against Ireland last November. Ireland beat them 53-7. So does that mean we're way better than Argentina as well? No, it doesn't. But it just shows the kind of crazy nature of some of these results, and the kind of efforts in coaching, that just how important the game has gone regard having a plan, structure, keeping your discipline.
And a squad, right?
And a squad. A lot of them are trying to get depth, Ger. They're trying to get depth, and they're trying to check. We heard Andy Farrell talk about the type of characters he wants and the mental tests. If you don't get carried away with a result like that, you can really build on it. And they go to Hamilton next week, and it's probably a similar situation to Ireland now, going to Wellington for that 3rd test. What will that be like? What will the backlash be like? But I think because they'll probably look at Ireland as well and think, well, we're right in this. But I thought there was times in the game, particularly early on, it was 15-6 in New Zealand, and they're a very, very impatient team. They're trying to score off first, second, third phase, throwing crazy passes, offloading under the tackle, trying to blow teams away really early with their attack. There's no sort of patience there at all. And I think they need to learn that. I still think they've got a lot of X-factor players, brilliant attack. They're not as good, obviously, up front as they would like to be, I think. And actually in the game on Saturday morning, it was their front 5 who actually played quite well. Their scrum and line-out was pretty dominant. I know they lost a couple of line-outs, but no sort of patience in what they're trying to do. And again, I'll just finish on this one before you ask again. Their discipline is shocking at times. I just think they make really bad decisions if they lose the ball and they end up backing it up or giving away a penalty. But the referee on Saturday, the Georgian referee, Amish U. Kelly, yeah, he's the guy who refereed. He's pretty inexperienced, the Georgian guy, and I just thought some of his decisions were pretty hard on New Zealand, and that's what Ian Foster was talking about after the game. But realistically, they've no one to blame only themselves.
Well, that's the type of thing you can fix, though, right? And like, you know, Joe Schmidt over a period of time turned Ireland into one of those teams that never conceded stupid penalties. We went from conceding loads to almost none. So it'd be interesting to see if he has an impact on that. I did want to bring up two other things. News broke in the last 24 hours or so that we're going to have an emerging Ireland squad that Andy Farrell brings to South Africa for 10 days and three matches in September. Players who are going to be taken out of URC action. And when you were talking about the chaos that the Rugby Championship has been, like you look at the various teams that South Africa have put out, I don't think South Africa really mind if they win or lose the Rugby Championship if it comes down to the fact that they have 50 players who are of international standard when the World Cup happens. And it probably feels like Andy Farrell has decided, having had some success with the midweek tour or the midweek games in New Zealand, this is a really good opportunity for him to like just get that next tier ready for when the inevitable injury crisis happens in time for the World Cup. And this, it seems like on the face of it, a really good idea.
Yeah, it does seem like a really good idea. I know maybe some of the provinces won't be pleased, or the URC won't be pleased that these players are coming up. But look, the nature of September anyway is there's a lot of chopping and changing, and that's always happens with the league, and nobody has a full side or are fully bedded back in having a full side. So, you know, obviously the IRFU are the bosses, and the provinces, of course, will work with them in that. And in principle, it's a very good idea. I think getting a group together, getting some more kind of togetherness, coaching, implementing what kind of structures and depth into the squad would be a very, very good idea. And obviously going to South Africa, I'm not sure who they're going to play yet or what the fixtures are, but again, getting a group away on tour, and similar to the Ireland women's team going to Japan, the benefits of going on tour and being together, getting to know people around you, and building your confidence, self-belief, and working with the coaches kind of, you know, from 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night if you want, because you're in the hotel, you're together, you can have little one-on-one meetings, you can change habits of players. I think that will be hugely beneficial for that next group. And I think that's the probably the biggest area that Ireland needs to keep pushing on, and every side does. I think Australia are very stretched at the moment, and they're actually doing pretty okay. That result of the weekend, obviously, against South Africa, but they have a lot of injuries. They have a lot of kind of perceived second string players playing for them and doing really well. So for us, it's about depth and getting players who are comfortable in that really big kind of pressurized environment, and making good decisions under pressure.
In fairness, that we would always have been critical of the IRFU's insistence that the first team must play every game in the Six Nations, and we must always treat those as must-win fixtures. If you're trying to develop a squad for the World Cup, you can't do that. And here, at least, they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're sending the team to South Africa with the head coach and presumably the full coaching ticket to give them the opportunity to get more exposure, so that at least if there is a crisis down the line, he'll have had access, and they will know what the demands of being in the international setup are much better than if they were like coming to train in Carton House and then getting shuffled back out for the weekends. It's just different. They're playing the Griquas, the Cheetahs and the Pumas in 10 days. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what the crack is with that. You mentioned there the benefits of the tour and being with the coaching ticket. We were talking to Niamh Briggs over the last couple of weeks from Japan, and she was making that point too, that going on tour with the team and the setup allowed them to have a much bigger influence over the players. Unfortunately, they couldn't back up the first brilliant performance with a second win, and that's also, I think, maybe something that we have to accept with the women's game at the moment, the national side, that it's not going to be a straight line in terms of success for the group.
Yeah, I think after winning the first test so dominantly, and I suppose, the feel-good factor of that result. And I've been following kind of the tour diaries online and videos they've put up, and they seem like they're having a brilliant time. It's a new environment for all of them, really. And again, like I mentioned a minute ago, you have the coaches around all the time. You're in a hotel, you can do little videos, you can do walkthroughs, you can do one-on-one meetings. The players can chat with each other. They can really work on their skill development. The amount of work and benefit you get, and we often see some of the GEA teams, Jared, going away for 3 days. And honestly, the amount of work you can get done in that period of time, as opposed to meeting up for a training session, trying to put meetings at the end of it. People are traveling home. They've got to go back to their families. When you're away from home, you can really switch on. And this is a new kind of scenario for them. And it was a brilliant tour to level the series. I think, Greg McWilliams himself said after the game that they didn't really fire a shot in that second test. There was probably reasons for that. First of all, Japan were always going to bounce back, as it happens in sport, and come out with probably more of an aggressive approach. The heat was a major factor and major issue for the Irish players for that second test. Conditions are incredibly hot there. It's unbelievably humid. I think emotionally, having that kind of high pitch the week before, learning about, how you become really ruthless and back it up is something that comes with experience in all sports, how you deal with that. But lots of positive. I think the set pieces were very strong throughout the tour. Skill development needs to improve more, for sure. I think we saw some brilliant tries in that first test, and even in the second test, the 2 tries they scored. I think the catch pass, the speed of delivery. I think Japan, their breakdown was superb in that second test, and probably if you were looking at a team as how you want to attack, it's unfortunately Ireland could look at Japan, what they did, and the catch pass, the speed of it was phenomenal at times, and they just cut Ireland open at times, and they didn't get their defensive line sorted. So, and you could kind of go into the technical details of what they did wrong in that second test, but overall, I think it was a very positive experience, and the performance in the first test was brilliant. But like most of the players said themselves in the interviews, they've got to learn from that and be able to back it up and find a way to hold on to the ball and kind of limit your mistakes and bring that execution and back it up from the week before. So 9 new players capped as well. So, again, Greg Williams and Niamh Briggs are trying to get some depth in the squad. But I think a really, really big positive couple of weeks for the Irish players, and lots of them can look forward to getting contracts now and preparing in a different way around nutrition and full-time training. So
it's a game changer, really.
From where we were a year ago, they're in a really good place, and I think there's lots of positives to take out of it.
All right, Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
It's 9:33 this morning. That's Alan Quinlan there giving us his thoughts. A reminder, we're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day.